It's 2024 and games keep getting harder to run. Hardware keeps getting more expensive, but I don't know about you, my budget still stays about the same. So, as we come into the new year, I was just looking at parts prices, looking at how all the sales were, how everybody's trying to move us into some new technology. And I like to get around on the forums, check out Reddit, browse PC part picker, look at different combos. And I was looking through it all and I was like, I think we could do better. I think we could do better. Let's look at some seriously cheap options and see if they're still viable at this point in time. So, what I've done is right before Christmas, I already built kind of a budget PC. I just wanted to have an extra PC. And I kind of built that with what I thought, the best price to performance was at the time. But now I want to see like if we really want to be a part of that PC master race, right? Like we don't want to buy a console. We don't want to be doing stuff like that. Uh, but what can we do on this tight budget? So one strategy's, I think it's been pretty well documented in the past. Just like, hey, I'm gonna build a workstation computer into a gaming computer for nothing. First of all, how viable is that anymore with you know the requirements some of these games are coming out with, the VRAM hysteria that's been going on the last year. And then also maybe you're uncomfortable doing used, or you don't really know what it takes. Hopefully I'll dig into that a little bit because I am going to do one for you guys. And then if you do just want to go brand new and you want to build the whole thing yourself, I will tell you that if you've never built a computer before, when you fire that thing up for the first time, uh, the organization mails you welcome to the master race package, and your life just gets better from there. But don't worry, it's in the mail. Anyway, uh, in all seriousness, though, like, what's the cheapest computer we can build going all brand new, and is it worth it? Which, luckily, kind of as a baseline, we're gonna have the computer that I thought I did a pretty good job building the budget PC on back in December, to kind of compare it to. And then we also got to look at, but like have the deals stayed the same? Like Black Friday's over, Christmas is over, a lot of the holidays are over, and a lot of companies are trying to get us to move into that newer tech. So we'll look at, like what's still feasible and whatnot. Because I mean, the prices on hardware these days, it's like playing the stock market. Like one day it's up, one day it's down. Individual parts swing 30 to $60. So when you're looking at the whole build, it could swing, $200 to $500. It's crazy these days. But yeah, this might be a multi-part video, just because I want to cover the actual parts selected, and then take a look at them, and then get some pretty in-depth testing put together, get some comparisons going, and then on some of these real budget builds, like, hey, did we leave too much on the table? Would we be better off spending an extra couple bucks? But the first thing we're going to start off with is we're going to start out looking at the PC part picker all brand new build. So this is probably one you guys spend any time going around, different threads on Reddit and stuff, you're probably thinking like, this has been, pretty spelled out. A lot of people ask for these budget builds, but I wanted to see what we could do. Like, what if we were on the tightest budget absolutely possible? So what we got here is pretty standard, but I want to go over some of these parts. So AM4, uh, it's a great platform. It's aging. I think there's going to be a time soon when I know they're still releasing new AM4 parts and all that good stuff. 5700 X3D is about to come out. It's actually pretty exciting because I felt like, everybody talks about how the 5800 X3D is just like the ultimate AM4 processor, and there's no question it is. But if you're if you're not willing to put a serious video card with it, you're probably overspending at the $350 it usually sells for. So having the 5700 X3D come out, that'll be great. Basically lowering the price down $100 down to 250. But enough about that. We're talking about budget absolute budget builds. So for a while, I would have never recommended the 5500. A lot of people, I think they kind of miss what they're missing on this processor. So a lot of people look at the 55, the 56, and they're like, "Oh, well, it's a six core 56, got a little bit higher clock speeds, that kind of stuff." There's a couple key things missing on the 55, and one of them is the L3 cache. If you're not paying attention, it's got about half as much as the 56. And as we've seen with these X3D processors, you know, the games love cache. They love the memory on the chip. Takes shortens the amount of time that it's got to go retrieve stuff. So it'll be interesting. I've never used this processor before. And I know you're thinking like, well, why'd you pick that one? Well, for a while, I would have never picked this one because it seemed like the 56s were coming down, down, down in price. You'd be able to pick them up on sale probably about like 120 for the regular, probably like closer to like 140 for the X. But they've since began to climb. So if we're talking about absolute budget build, I didn't feel like the 56 hit the mark anymore, so we're going to step it down to the 55. And I thought it would just be interesting to get a test done on this thing, just see what kind of performance I'm able to get out of it, uh, see where that's at. Another nice thing with these, it's already going to come with a cooler, so we don't got to worry about CPU cooler on that one. It's going to come with its little AMD Wrath cooler. So next up, let's get through the rest of the looking at this build. Asus Prime B450M. So probably some people are thinking, well, that's an interesting choice. I always like to go with the B over the A series on the AMD. And I originally was looking at a 500 series motherboard, but I'm trying to keep this price down. And when I was looking at those entry level 5 series boards, I just assumed since they were the newest series to come out with AM4, they'd all support the 5000 series Ryzen processors. But the more and more I looked into it, it's kind of a lottery. So what you got to look out for is many of them will say we'll support it with BIOS update. I expected that out of the older chipset boards, but I figured out of the newer chipset boards, it would just right out of the box be able to support the Ryzen 5 5500. And it didn't. Once doing a little bit of research, it didn't appear like that was necessarily true, especially on some of these cheaper options. So if you are unsure if a motherboard is going to support your processor without a BIOS update, you need to have some way to update the BIOS. So on these cheaper boards, sometimes the only option is to put in one of those older chipset process or one of the older generation processors in order to get to boot up, load the BIOS, and then you can put your new processor you're planning on using in there. That's really not the plan that I want to carry out, because if you're on a super budget, you're building your one computer and you're done, you probably just don't have a bag of extra Ryzen CPUs laying around, right? So the reason why I selected this one in particular is this critical component here is the BIOS flashback. So what that's going to allow you to do is even if it can't boot with the processor installed, you can go ahead and load your BIOS onto a USB, plug it in there, you push that BIOS flashback with power applied, and it'll go ahead and load that BIOS in there for you. So basically, it's $79.98. That was the cheapest motherboard I could find that I thought had decent options on it that supported that BIOS flashback, so I could make sure no matter what, I could get the Ryzen 5 5500 running with no problems on there. Come up to the memory here. This was just flat out what was the cheapest thing that I felt was even acceptable on PC part picker. So I went in there. I said I want at least 16 gigs, DDR 3200. There might have been something a little cheaper at CL18, but I'm trying to get at least a little bit of performance out of here, and I figured for $32, it doesn't get much better than that. So that's what we're looking at there. I don't usually use a whole lot of silicone power stuff. Hopefully it'll be good for us though. We'll find out. And then storage. This is probably the one thing I got mixed feelings on the storage. Oh yeah, PCIe 3.0. So that's the other thing you're missing out. Ryzen 5500 only supports the 3.0 on a budget build like this. That's not gonna be a factor, but a PCIe 3.0 and the L2 cache. That's about half of the 56 and a little bit slower speeds. That's what you're getting into there. So for the storage, we're looking at PCIe 3.0. That's going to be plenty fast on the M.2 drive for anything we want to do on this. Now, generally speaking, I would not highly recommend just doing half a terabyte, 512 gig M2 drive. But once again, we're trying to get this as cheap as possible, and this will allow us at least get us with the rig up and running. And that's something easy. You can always expand storage in the future. You'll be able to get Windows on here, install quite a few games. If we're looking in this price bracket, we're probably not going to be playing, every massive AAA title out there. This is kind of getting us into, hopefully we can start to experience PC gaming. Tons of indie games will run on this thing great. Maybe a couple of AAA esports games. Those are all going to do great. So a lot of those don't take up a ton of space either. So this will at least get us going. And then if we find that we need more storage in the future, that's one of the easiest things to upgrade later because we just straight add it in. You don't have to replace anything, feel like you're wasting your money, anything like that. We're going to skip the video card for a minute. We're going to talk about that last. And then we're going to keep moving here. So the case, this was another straight up, what is the cheapest thing? So organized it. You really got to check these cases. I wish there was a case I could just, be like my go-to case every time I want to do a budget build. But when you're looking at that real low price range, the prices they just shift. Cases go on sale. Brand does a promo because they want to get their name out there, yada yada yada. It's always shifting up and about, but I got that one off Newegg for $29.99, which I felt pretty satisfied with. When the box came in, though, I was feeling pretty light, which obviously it's a cheap case, probably a little bit flimsy, but I haven't even opened the box yet to take a look at it. But definitely felt light, so thing might be made out of paper. And then final, last thing up, the power supply. I will talk about this one for a minute too. So power supplies seems like it's always a hot topic. People are like, don't cheap out on your power supply. It's gonna burn your house down. You're just being irresponsible. Thing's a nuke. It's gonna go off any moment. Like they got the cult web page with the ratings and all that. I do think there's something to be said about that. I always want to run a nice power supply when I'm putting together an expensive computer. My personal rig that I'm using right now, I think I got like 1,000 watt EVGA Supernova or something like that when I built this a little while ago. That was one of the top rated ones. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about absolute budget builds. So the reason why I chose this one, I've tried to do quite a bit of research on the Thermaltake. I usually think the products are like all right for budget options, and I was kind of thinking like, how are their ATX power supplies? And for most of the stuff I could find, everybody was like, they're absolute trash, they're bad, replace, terrible. Uh, so then why is it on my list? Well, every place that I saw that actually did testing on it said that all the protections at least worked. So if I'm going ultra budget and I'm trying to get this thing built as cheap as possible, it's either going to be dead on arrival and I'm going to give it back to Amazon, or it's going to work. And then if it does fail, I'm pretty dang confident that this thing's not going to turn into a nuke and burn my house down. It's probably just going to fail and the safeties are going to kick in. If I had to bet the value of this PC that it would not just totally fry the PC, then I'm going to bet the value of this PC because as you can see here, we're at a whopping $311.88 right now for this PC. But of course, the elephant in the room is the video card. Video card. What are we going to do with the video card? So, usually on these budget builds, like your goal should be to spend probably 50% of your budget on the video card, unfortunately. So, if we're at 311, that'd give us, another $300 for a $600 gaming PC. And in the $300 range, that'll put you, somewhere uh, probably with AMD. You go for the newest generation, like 7600 for a little less than that, like 260. Or you could do, 6700. They sometimes drop down to 300. I think they're a little higher right now, though. Yeah, you take a look at, 339. That's not too good. I think I bought one for build probably a month ago for $299. I think it was even this ASRock. No, it wasn't that one. It was something else. I don't know. Maybe one of these. Anyway, those prices drop from time to time. But if we're talking about the $600 budget, that's the same old that we're always doing. So I needed some inspiration for this build. So I ended up doing is coming over here to the Steam hardware survey just to be like, well, what's everybody else using? And I know what you're thinking. Don't be a sheep. What's the point if we're just being a sheep? But you got to at least get some inspiration here. So the first thing I notice is it's all NVIDIA. If we're talking budget build, unless we're going some ancient thing that's used, like the GTX 1650, that's not what we're looking for. But that's probably what we're thinking. I think it's interesting. The first item up here on for AMD. Here, let me make this bigger. You can't even read it. So first item here for AMD is just AMD Radeon graphics. So I'm assuming that's like integrated graphics. So these are just the poor chums that happen to buy a laptop with an AMD card. That's your number one AMD user, which is kind of hilarious. And then right behind him is Intel Iris Xe or whatever. That's another laptop bubba, UHD laptop bubba. So if you're not Nvidia, you're just a guy with an integrated graphics on a laptop, which is kind of depressing. And this is interesting. I'm pretty sure AMD dropped official support and driver updates for the RX 580 about a year ago, I think. Maybe longer now. Time keeps passing. But there it is. Still the champion. Still the champion right there. Outside of integrated graphics, still the number one AMD card. Like 8 years later, this thing just can't be beat. And you come down here, more integrated stuff than the 6700. If we wanted to go into the $600, range, you could go with the 6700. That's a great card. It's got the 12 gigs of VRAM. It's gonna do well for 1080p. It'll do great for 1440 also. As games get more demanding, people are using that more on the 1080. The RX 570, it's basically just a declocked 580. 5700, super underrated card. You can buy these used for dirt cheap. And a great thing about it is it doesn't even tempt you to use the ray tracing. You're just like, that's not part of my life. I'm not going down that road. I don't need to worry about it. And in rasterized performance, actually pretty solid card. And then this is the one that I thought was interesting. The Radeon RX 580 2048 SP. I had no idea what that was. I had to look it up, and I guess kind of a couple years after AMD originally did the RX 580, they released this 2048. That's how many shader cores are on it, I believe. So it's just a little bit of a cut down die on that card. And so that kind of tips me off. It's like, all right, a lot of AMD 580s out there. So surely in 2024, we can't buy one of these things anymore, right? I mean, there's just no way. And let's see here. We just come on over to Newegg. Boom. This blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. Radeon RX 580, 8 gig graphics card, over half off, $88. Wow. So you're telling me that for $88, I can join a league of Steam players that just all are still rocking the RX 580 in 2024. And we're only at 311 for our total build here. So we're talking we're going to be under $400 for this PC. That's cheaper than a next gen console or whatever, which I know what you're thinking. I know. Yeah, but what you get out of the console is going to be, way better. There's no way this thing's going to do 4K gaming. It's not. There's no way it's going to be anywhere close. It's not. But the difference is if you need a PC and you need something you can, do homework on, or do some light workloads on, you need something you can get on your office suite, and you still want to be able to game, and you don't have the money to put something crazy together, and you just need a solution. That's what we're going for here. We're not going for a monster build. Uh, I can throw 4090 and 7800 X3D for anybody that just wants to do that, because that's not very hard. You just say, hey, where's the money? But yeah, ultimately that's what we're gonna do. I got a little bit worried about this thing, so when you come in here and take a look at this, it's $88. It's half off. I'm pretty sure it's always half off. It's been this price for a while, and it's sold on Newegg, but it's clearly, you always got to watch out for this. It's sold by a third party store, and this thing just screams. I mean, it just screams China. It's straight out of China, which there's nothing wrong with that, but you just don't really know the whole story of this card. So I tried to do some research. A lot of people say there's a lot of cards that basically were mining cards that they, I don't want to call it refurbish, but they throw on new coolers, different things like that, make it look brand new, and then they export them. So I don't really know how this is gonna go, but I'm gonna try it out in case anybody else ever wants to take a dive on this one. Like I said, I think the driver support officially ended for this card. But I mean, for $88, you're looking at 8 gig graphics card, 256-bit GDDR5, PCI Express 3.0, which is going to match that Radeon 5500 CPU's capabilities perfectly. And I actually already got this thing in. It did take a little while to ship. It says shipped by Newegg, but it definitely took, I don't know, I think it was like a week or 2 weeks. I would kind of compare this. It's on Newegg, but I would kind of compare this to like buying something off AliExpress or something like that, probably. Uh, but anyway, for the build, that's all the parts I selected. We're gonna throw them together, see how they do. I'm gonna unbox that card just because I want to take a look at like what is this thing, and I'll do that I'll do that here in a moment, and we'll take a look at that, and then we'll get the whole PC built, and we'll start getting some testing done on it, and then we'll go through and kind of compare that to some of our other rigs we might be able to put together for real budget and see where the best value to money is. So let's go ahead and start taking a look at those parts. All right, let's take a look at the parts for our PC part picker build. First thing up, got that Sama case. Uh, like I said, when I got this in the box, I bet this thing weighs, I mean, 2 pounds max. Luckily, it's not made out of paper like I said it might be. I mean, you can already see it's packaged pretty well. This was new. Already got a little ding in it. Probably somebody sneezed on it. On the front here, it's probably hard. I don't even hope you guys see it. They do have a USB 3.0. Pretty simple case. No glass here on it. Just aluminum all sides. The screws on the thing, they are little thumb screws, but they are plastic, so that is what it is. No real big surprise there. Opening this up for the first time, looks like we got some instructions here for it. That's nice. Probably won't read those if we can't figure it out. Something else though. But anyway, we'll see how they perform. But I mean, the big choice for this case was a lot of people choose a cheap case, but then they don't come with any fans, and we do want to be able to cool this thing down. So this thing actually comes with 1, 2, 3. Might see if I can reposition these. This one's like, I don't know, a cool power supply. It's already got its own fan. Pretty far down in there, but it's already got 3 case fans installed. Got ventilation in the front. Looks like it did come with a magnetic screen, so that's pretty nice. It's kind of funny they cut holes in it, I guess, so you can screw and unscrew fans, because it would just be too much effort to just remove that magnetic piece there. But anyway, it's about what you'd expect from a $30 case. I can already tell it's all just Molex connectors in the back, but these aren't RGB or anything fancy like that. Just standard 120 millimeter black fans. Overall, I think it's about what you'd expect. Pretty impressed for 30 bucks. It's got the 3 fans. Usually you spend, even on a budget pair, probably 15 bucks for 3 fans. Plus you're getting the actual case. And ultimately we just need this thing to house our parts, right? So kind of move on, take a look at some next stuff here. Next up, we got that Asus B450. Like I said, haven't even opened this guy yet. Looks like he's still sticker on him. Does have the Aura sync, so this thing's probably got some ARGB headers on it. Open it up. I'm sure it's got its cabling and everything in here. And then the most critical part, we got to make sure, yep, got that BIOS flashback. So we'll make sure we get the most up-to-date BIOS loaded on this thing. Should do great. That's going to be real easy. We've got, as discussed before, our Ryzen 5 5500 processor we're going to throw in that thing. And then, of course, got it right over here. Our 16 gigs, nothing fancy. DDR4 3200, should have no problem running that. Vera M2 drive, I think I got that sitting downstairs. Then let's talk about the real gem here. Peladn gaming graphics card. Beyond the gamer. This thing is beyond me. Like I can't go as far as this thing's already gone. It's so intense. Overall, like I said, I've never tried one of these before. Should be interesting. I'm going to go through with a full unboxing, see what this bad boy looks like. But a lot of font and text here. Basically bad AI generated English talking about how it's the best thing that a gamer could ever game with. Pull it out. They got the memo. Everybody likes the luxury black tuxedo feel. Interior box here. Not some cheap brown cardboard for the peasants. We got the nice black. Cool. Wow, look at that. They even give you a screwdriver just for this video card. These guys are forward thinking. Turn this guy around. This is like a piece of velvet foam. I like that. I like that. And then here we go. What is this? All right, you can power this thing off of some Molex connectors or whatever. Awesome. Let's get this gem out of here. This is going to be powering our workhorse. I hope I got a monitor with enough refresh rate to support this thing. Feels like a beast. I should do it itself. All right, here we go. All right, this is how you know it's got some horsepower, serious horsepower. Caution. Anything that's got a caution advisory, made for top tier gamers, man. Honestly, first look, no real copper here used or anything like that. No surprise there. Fans look good. Kind of a no brand look to it. But ultimately, I think back in the day, I actually had an RX 580, but I think it was the MSI version. But the key here is this is a sub $100 card with 8 gigs of VRAM, which is hard to find brand new these days. And like I said, I don't know how the driver support's going to go, but I'm anticipating with the amount of people that are still running these cards, according to the Steam hardware survey, that we'll be able to get this thing up and running and pretty much do whatever we want. But we'll find out. Alright, so now that we go in here, we're going to just tweak a couple basic things here. So, the AI overclock tuner, you need to turn the DOCP on, DOCP DDR4 3200 with the timings at CL16 with the rest of it in there. That's going to auto overclock your RAM to the manufacturer's specifications. And we're going to come down here and tweak a few things. So for Precision Boost Overdrive, if you switch that to auto, PBO auto basically means off. So we got to get that enabled. Scaler, I'm basically just going to allow it to push a little bit past its like normal factory limits times 4 though. Nothing's crazy is going to happen. We still have the auto thermal limit on there, so you're not going to allow it to overheat. Then we're going to turn that max CPU boost override. We're going to add 200 megahertz. That'll basically put the frequency on par with the 5600. So it's still not going to be the same processor because we only got half the L3 cache. We got the 16 megs versus the 32 megs, but at least we'll be able to match it in frequency. Might help us out a little bit there. So now we got the XMP set up on the RAM. We got a little bit of additional there. We're kind of come into the AMD overclocking here, Precision Boost Overdrive. Need to go to advanced here. Just gonna turn the PBO limits. We really want to long-term tweak these further. We don't need them at the motherboard limits, but I'm gonna go ahead and set that now so we don't run into any like voltage problems or anything crazy like that. Scaler, once again, I don't know why it sets it twice. I think there's like the Asus tweaker versus the actual just like motherboard limits here. And then curve optimizer, we're gonna go ahead all core negative 20. That's pretty conservative. And consider now we haven't even fully booted this computer up yet, but these are the settings I found pretty much any AM4 can run. You can do that negative curve optimizer minus 20. It's basically going to give you a small undervolt on it, and then you can usually get easily that plus 200 megahertz. It's going to take a 5600, basically make it match a 5600X, 5500. It's going to put the boost on par with the 56. But like I said, that L3 cache is going to cost you a little bit in game performance, but I think for the setup we got going on, it'll actually be a pretty good match. So with that, that's kind of my basic. What do I do for quick BIOS setup? A lot of people will just say, hey, boot, make sure it works. At this point, I already know pretty decent. It booted. It's good to go. I'm going to put my conservative little bit of stuff in there just so I can get it running. Make sure it at least takes what I consider to be conservative settings. And then once I get Windows loaded, I'm going to come back in and dial some of this stuff in. I might do a per core curve optimizer, might come in, play with that a little bit more. And instead of using those motherboard limits, I might tune back some of the voltages, different types of things, try to get this thing running stable, running with a little bit less power, more clocks, and overall just lean build. But for now, that's basically what I'd come in, doing the initial setup. At minimum, make sure you get your RAM with that pre-spun profile, because that's already programmed into your kit. You just got to turn it on, or else you're going to be running, like you saw, just the default 2666, which on the AMD matters when you start going that slow, because that's also setting your Infinity Fabric time. So I think it was basically the 2666, because it's double data rate as 1333 on the Infinity Fabric. When then we went up to 32, it goes up to 1600, because remember, it's going to be half because it's double data rate. So you take that in half, that's going to be your Infinity Fabric speed. If you need to learn more about that, look it up. It's a whole thing that I don't want to explain during this video, but just keep in mind, half of double is the regular rate. So there you go, learn something new. But that's basically what we're going to do for the BIOS setup, and we're just going to need to go find my Windows USB stick. I'm sure it's laying around here somewhere, and we'll get that thing loaded up. So right in the middle of my install, I'm in my rickety ass attic with my Walmart folding table workbench, and I blew a circuit breaker because I had too many computers running. So I had to go screaming down to the garage to reset that thing, and now we're reinstalling Windows again. But looks like the computer overall didn't care. Definitely a workhorse. That old Thermaltake Smart didn't give a shit. It lost power. So it shouldn't, but I've seen wilder things. But yeah, here we go again, take 2 on the Windows install. Alright, so now we've made it into Windows here. US, yeah. Yep. Yep. And you just gotta say right here, I don't have internet. And once again, we're just gonna continue with limited setup. Basically, that lets you bypass doing all the login and everything, so that you can set this up just as your generic Windows. Now you are still gonna get the not activated, but I usually do it this way when I'm just basically I want to get it running. I don't want to log into an account. Don't want to tie myself to it. Maybe I'm gonna pass this on to somebody. Um, Something along those lines. But I don't know why it takes people a lot to figure that out, because everybody always connects their internet and then they're like, "What do I do? I don't want to log in." Um, Maybe I'm the only one, but that's the quick workaround. And then as soon as it loads into Windows, the first thing I do is I connect the internet and I do Windows Update, just to get all the updates on there. A lot of people complain about AMD drivers. I found that the easiest way to mess it up is to install an AMD video driver prior to doing your Windows updates, because Windows Update tries to pull its own driver for some reason. And it seems like NVIDIA, that's perfectly normal for its driver to say, nope, I've already got it. And AMD, no, Windows tries to override it all the time. Then you end up in this weird situation with corrupted drivers. So most people that I see complain, I have pretty good experience with AMD drivers, actually. I've been enjoying them a lot. But it's just that extra step. You got to have the knowledge to do the proper order of operations. So I always let Windows fully update, and then I install my AMD driver, and then I go about my business with the rest of the computer. So I'm going to go ahead and get my internet hooked up right now, because there you go. There's the desktop. All right, so boom, just like that. It's the next day. Definitely got some decent sleep, but the results are done. I can see, you can see I got all of them posted up here for you. Before we get into analysis and kind of looking at where we're at with the build, how happy I am, I'm going to go ahead and roll some of those clips so you can see the thing in action, and then we'll be right back, take a look at these results.
You picked the wrong day to screw with us. Fuck yourselves. Report! You're cleared hot!
All right, so all in all, not too bad. Build did pretty well. I'm going to go into kind of my game selection, why we're looking at the games we're looking at, and kind of how the computer did all in all as the $400. I think total the came out to $399, just about on the dot for this PC part picker best budget build. And first, I'll kind of go over the chart here. So obviously, across the bottom, you got your frames per second. On the y-axis on the left there, you've got your actual game played with settings. And I've drawn two critical lines here. So you've got the red vertical line that's posted about 30 frames per second. I really don't want anything below 30 frames per second. I mean, when you start dipping below that, even on a budget build, you're getting into the realm of, not even basic console type play. So if you're not aware, a lot of consoles, when you put them to their visual setting, they're targeting a 30 frame per second. So that's kind of our minimum what we're going to consider here. And then in the green line there, we've got our 60 FPS. So anything above 60 FPS, that's where I consider like, hey, we're kind of getting into that PC profile that we want to be looking at. And then as far as games selected, I wanted to get a kind of a swath of things without going just too crazy and having to just do benchmark after benchmark after benchmark. I already got quite a few in the books here. But first of all, just going from the top down, Resident Evil 4. So it's a remake. It's a single player game, so I'm not anticipating, and it's been out for a long time. This is just the remake, so it's the same Resident Evil 4 game. It's been ported a bunch of times, but I wanted to put it on there mostly because it's been known to be pretty VRAM hungry. So I wanted to see as we do. Ultimately, I'm going to do these tests through all three of the builds. My personal budget build that I made, this one for the sub $400 PC part picker build, and then my workstation conversion. So I think this game is going to become more and more interesting because it is pretty VRAM hungry. And if you're taking note in the footage there, it was actually allocating right at that max 8 gigs on this card. So we'll see how that goes in the future. Then I put The Last of Us on there because I thought that was a great example of some of these next gen console ports that are coming over. So that one's directly from the PlayStation. Used to be a PlayStation exclusive. Now we got it over onto the PC. It was known to just be an absolute backbreaker when it came out, but it's been patched quite a bit, and we'll take a look at how I feel on that. Next up, Cyberpunk. That's just been the benchmark. Golden boy for years at this point in time. Came out forever ago. We are up to that 2.0 with the DLC and everything for it. So a lot of people are replaying that game again. Then I went ahead and included Forza, mainly because everybody's got to have a racing game on the roster. I'm not a huge racer, but I do dabble from time to time, and Forza is a pretty popular one. Fortnite, I'm not personally a Fortnite fanboy, but I know it's like the number one played game online. It seems like year after year. I don't know if it still is. I think technically, actually, Minecraft usually beats it. But if you don't include Minecraft, which is kind of a league of its own for the amount of players that play that game, which is kind of wild to me, Fortnite's usually pretty high up there. Then Valorant, just because I think that that's a good representation of just a true esports game. Shouldn't be hard to run. Same thing with Counter-Strike 2. That just recently came out. I included that one because Counter-Strike 2 did include updated visuals, things like those smoke effects, different stuff like that. And then, of course, Modern Warfare 3. That's our 2023, what I consider esport game. Uh, just came out a little bit ago. And it's got a built-in benchmark, so it makes it easy. So if we go from the top down here, I think what you'll find is most of these games, if you look at our single players like the Resident Evil, The Last of Us, Cyberpunk, what it's taken for us to get into the realm of what I would really want to play with is a little bit of upscaling. So you can get that 40 to 50 in Resident Evil and Cyberpunk by just really going with the low settings, probably. Or you can just get a little bit of an upscaling. Now, I know a lot of people don't like upscaling on the 1080p. when you're looking at the ultimate budget build, you're already stretching that you want to play some of these newest single player titles. So to me, if you want to have the experience, I highly suggest everybody has those experiences. Last of Us is a great franchise, some of the most fun I've had in gaming in a single player game. Resident Evil 4, I mean, there's a reason they remade it. It's an absolute classic. But regardless, probably what I would end up doing is I would try to balance for these kind of those medium settings. And then when I do upscaling on AMD, it's been well documented. People prefer DLSS to the FSR. So I never go lower than the quality setting. I mean, I can sit here and benchmark all day long, putting it at performance mode where it's rendering it, like 360p or something like that. But on the quality setting, that's going to put your game from 1080 native down to 720p. It's going to upscale it there for you. And really, the results, in my opinion, on either one of these was not bad at all. Not bad at all. And that's getting you to your average on Resident Evil 4. You can see there we had 57 with the 1% low at 40. Even our 1% low is staying well above that 30 FPS line. So that's a very playable experience. I'd like to see that, slightly over 60. I could probably tweak it a little bit more, especially with Resident Evil 4. It doesn't have really solid presets in that game. It just has a lot of settings. So you could probably tweak that a little bit further. Even the medium without the upscaling, if you are a guy who's like upscaling actually absolutely bugs me. Um, it was definitely playable on that game. Last of Us Part 1 was a little bit harder. So I didn't even try going out for like the extreme settings on this one. I came in at medium. You can see there 24 FPS with 15 and the 1% low. Just not an enjoyable experience. Going to low, 29 and 21 respectively, and then lowest 37 and 27 respectively. So ultimately, what I did, once again, I turned FSR on the quality on here, and you get the 43 FPS with the 1% low right at 28 there. And a lot of people are like, oh man, the lowest settings, the lowest settings. Once again, it's a budget build, and I think you'll find if you ever played this on the PlayStation, especially if you're on the PlayStation 4, when you were playing this game, it was probably also running it on the lowest settings. So it almost looks more authentic to the original game when you're playing on those low settings. Would I love to crank it up, extra, ultra, high, whatever? Absolutely. But bottom line, on a $399 build, you're just not going to be able to do it. But the good news is, you will be able to have a playable, enjoyable experience. That game's all about the story anyways, so just load it up and enjoy it. Cyberpunk, obviously, this is the backbreaker for the last 3 or so years for benchmarks. We're running a 580, so uh, ray tracing is obviously not going to be a factor here, which is what this game is known for, because obviously they were the first to implement the path tracing demo option there, where you could turn that on and just absolutely cripple even your 4090. So that was good for a laugh for everybody. But you can see it's definitely a playable game. I loved this game when it first came out. I was like, I think the one person everybody was dogging on it because performance was so bad. I think the biggest mistake there was that they tried to include it for last gen consoles, because the PS5 and the Xbox X were not widespread enough at that point in time. I think they were released, but they weren't widespread enough. There's supply shortages, everything else. So they tried to put it on the last gen console, and it just didn't have the horsepower. And so when a majority of people were trying to play it, on a budget computer from 3 years ago and or PS4, it just wasn't going to work well. I played it on a pretty decent system, and I was able to get through it with no game breaking bugs, but it is what it is. As far as this computer goes, you can see that all it takes is to run ultra is not going to do it, but close to 30 FPS. But the medium is going to get you 37 on the average, 28 on the 1% low. Low is going to get you 47, 34. So that'll get your 1% low even above that 30 FPS. That'll be pretty smooth for you. And then if you do choose to do the FSR quality setting, that gets you almost dang near the 60 FPS that we're really looking for. So coming out of the gate, it's not looking too strong for this guy, but also I started out with my heaviest games that were single player just to see, is this thing still going to play new releases when they come out? And then for Forza, great game to benchmark as well, but it's pretty easy to run. Obviously, we're not doing ray tracing in this game either. The extreme does break the 30 frames per second mark. However, that's probably not how I'd play it. I'd at least go down to medium. That's going to get your average at 64, and the game still looks really good. Even medium down from extreme, the visuals still look great in that game. It's not a terrible experience. Low just continues the trend. Now we're up in the 74s. And then the lowest, yeah, it does shoot your frames per second average up there to 93. But I'll be honest with you, the lowest, that's when I really did start to see some degradation, some serious degradation in the graphics. The backgrounds look real bad. I mean, the cars still look pretty good, but the backgrounds start looking cheesy. It looks like I'm playing, uh, Gran Turismo on my PS2 or something. So I would probably choose to either do medium or low and then play around with if you need to do a little bit of upscaling. I didn't test it on this one because I felt like there was enough options on here that you could just go ahead and test the 1080p native, because we're going to try to stick for that across the board as much as we can for these games, because we're going to have at the end, when I sum these three builds up for your title of the best budget PC, we've got some NVIDIA and some AMD cards in here. So we're going to try to keep the native resolution to the max extent possible. And I felt pretty comfortable that Forza could definitely do that for you. But if you actually owned this PC, you could definitely dial it in, see what you prefer between the medium and the low settings, and whether you feel like you need some more frames per second or not with a little bit of upscaling. For Fortnite, uh, I had honestly never played Fortnite before. I downloaded this thing just because I know how popular it is, loaded into my first game, and I got 3 kills and then got bored because my testing was done, and I built a stairway to heaven and jumped off of it. I thought I could re-parachute like COD, but no, I just died. Or maybe I didn't know the right button or something. But anyway, as far as performance goes, the medium definitely playable. It looked pretty good on medium too. I was getting 93 FPS with a 1% low of the 72. And then on the low settings, if you got a higher refresh monitor, something these days like a 1080p 144 hertz, I mean, you can get those all day long, dirt cheap. And if you're trying to get every competitive edge, the lowest latency possible, you could definitely get the settings down there to low for your average of 128 with the 1% of 101. So even your 1% is over 100 FPS at this point, which is pretty solid. Valorant should be no surprise. That game's absolutely cake to run. You see the big differentiation, I think, in the 1% low there and the average, just because I was just going through the practice mode, and there's some inside regions, there's some outside regions where there's almost nothing to render. And I think that's kind of where you see some big variance there, because at some points, if you paid attention during the footage, it'd be like, nearly almost 500 FPS, and then at other points it'd be dropping down to like 100 and something. So that game's just really dependent upon what you're looking at, how much is being rendered. If you're staring off the sky, obviously it's gonna be really easy to do. But even a potato could run Valorant. So, but that puts us right in line. That one's gonna be just because it's so easy to run, really CPU bound. You can see our CPU is doing pretty good because obviously it's able to average a 252 FPS. For the Counter Strike, this one I thought was really interesting. So at the highest, I'm assuming because with Counter Strike 2, they got all those new features like the smokes that you can interact with and different things like that. At the highest, definitely good performance, 94 FPS on the average, 82 on the 1% low. And then when you drop down to medium, you see this massive jump. So I didn't do enough testing today because I haven't played that game a whole lot yet. It's relatively recently to come out that they updated to the Counter Strike 2, not just the standard. And I'm assuming that you start losing some of the new effects that they've added in there, because all of a sudden you're like doubling your frames per second. On medium, you're looking at 216 on the average, 192 on the 1% low, and then on the low, you're looking at 272 on the average, 242 on the 1% low. So I'd be willing to bet that you're probably running out of hertz on your monitor at this point. A lot of people, might rock the 240 hertz. So if you do, those low settings could definitely get you there. But even the medium, on the 240, you might play around with it, see what you like visually, what you like to look at more. And then Modern Warfare 3, also a relatively recent release, and this one actually has a little bonus round included in it, which surprised me. So I knew this game was a little harder to run than some of the other esports like CS2 and Valorant, but I wanted to go ahead and see what we could do on the extreme. So I loaded it up, put the settings to extreme. It did average 38 frames per second with 27 on the 1% low. So we did beat that 30 FPS mark, but let's be honest, it's a competitive game. I don't want to roll around with 30 FPS like I'm living in 2016. So we dropped it down to balance mode. That gives you a 54 on your average, 44 on your 1% low. We keep going down. Minimum's going to get you 64 on your average. Now, for the first time, we've broken 60 FPS on a native resolution, rocking this RX 580 with your 1% low on the 50 FPS. And then, of course, at that point, if you're going to need to get some upscaling involved if you want to get well beyond that 60 FPS. So when we went with those minimum settings, went ahead and put the quality upscaler on there. We got our average up to 75 FPS and 63 on the 1% low. So if you're one of those guys who's rocking a 60 FPS monitor, because we are talking about absolute budget, or maybe you bought something off Amazon and they got it to a whopping 75 hertz, that's kind of the settings you're going to be looking at. Probably minimum. I should have tried out. I would have been really interested to see what the balance settings with like a balance upscale would look like. I bet you that would probably be a pretty good competitive setup to get you at least some amount of textures in the game. But I didn't have time to test that one. And then the real outlier here. So this is a competitive game, and there's a lot of people out there that have really documented the frame generation and what that's good for. So I don't want to go too into it, but we'll go into some basics. When I loaded this game up, I guess I haven't played it in a little bit. I noticed that FSR 3 is now included in a Modern Warfare 3. I'm not talking about fluid motion frames at the driver level. I'm talking about actual FSR 3. And I was pretty interested when that first came out because obviously it was adding some competition to Nvidia, and where Nvidia gates their DLSS 3 behind the 40 series cards, AMD does not. They do have recommendations, so I think they recommend at least a 6000 series card. But when I saw that option, I just had to try it out. So I went ahead, loaded up with the minimum settings, FSR with the quality upscale, and then also the frame generation on. And you can see, and this comes with a caveat, it looks very impressive. So 125 FPS on the average and 81% on the 1%, or 81 frames on the 1% low. I don't want to go too into this, but the way that frame generation on the most basic level works is it inherently adds latency because you have a frame, it's going to interpolate a frame, but it needs to know where it's going from the next frame. So it's got to render this frame, interpolate this frame, display the sequence. That's a real rough description, but the entire point of having higher FPS is to have a more responsive game. So if it's rendering more frames per second, that's actually direct action that's happening in the game that you were seeing. If it's delaying at all to produce another frame to interpolate the frame in the middle to then give you 3 frames to up your frame rate, it will make the image look smoother, but you are not getting more data to your old Mark 1 eyeball than you were before when you were getting 75 FPS without the frame gen on. So that's my real rough description. I find it very interesting. I think it's just that Modern Warfare 3, Modern Warfare and Call of Duty in general just try to implement as many upscaling options as they can. So they've got, Intel's S, they got DLSS, they got FSR, multiple different models in there. You can get 1.0, used to be able to then do 2, now they got 3 in there. So I think they probably just included it because it's Activision. They got a huge staff. I guess they can. Um, but frame generation is more designed for those single player games. Like I might explore turning frame generation on in The Last of Us or in Resident Evil 4, which unfortunately is currently not offered. But I would not turn that on a competitive multiplayer game because it's actually adding latency to just smooth your image. Where I want reduced latency because I want the most information now. So that's kind of how the benchmarks worked out for today. I'm going to save my final thoughts on value until I get the other two builds done. Those are going to be in future videos. This one already turned out way longer than I thought it was going to. But hopefully you enjoyed me building this PC. We went ahead, bought the parts all brand new, put the whole thing together. Obviously, kind of a dated card, wanted to see if it could still swing. I think there's evidence here that depending on your playstyle, it definitely can. But I'm gonna save my final thoughts, like I said, till I get my videos done on the other two builds that I have, and then we'll kind of come together with like where's the value really at, and kind of what experience are you gonna have. But hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you go ahead and subscribe to the channel, then you'll get a notice when I come out with my next video with my next budget build. And hope you have a great rest of your day.